I'm delighted to be with you here again. It's Mentor Day, and I hope you're well. I'm starting today on the new, what I call Book of the Day series. Every day, I'm going to talk about a book that I've read and that I've found some golden nuggets of wisdom, and more importantly, that I've applied and I've seen results. Because results is the game. It's not about gathering knowledge and information. It's about applying the knowledge, applying it in a smart way, and creating tangible results. And so today's the first of what I hope, what I believe will be one of many reviews that I might do and share over the next perhaps few months. Who knows, it might go over the next year. Now, in today's session, I'm going to be talking about a book that I've read that I want to recommend. I want to recommend it for a number of reasons. The most important being what I've learned from what I consider to be great principles and great philosophies about living and living well. Now, I have a mission. My mission in life is to help people, empower people on strategies or with strategies and principles and philosophies and ways in which they can improve and better their lives. I come from very humble beginnings, and my life today and the success that I've achieved, subjective as that might be, because it's personal to me. Only I know where I started from. Only I really know the journey that I've had to go through to be here. And every area of my life is a reflection of the knowledge and the experiences and the wisdom of other people. I've lived my life through other people's experiences, and for that reason I've been able to leapfrog where I should be had I gone from the conventional route. And so what I'd like to do is share some of my ideas, but also more importantly share what I've learned, and hence the recommendation of a book. In today's session, I'm going to be talking about a book called The Science of Getting Rich. It's a book by Wallace Wattles. It's a classic. I believe it's a classic for a number of reasons. The first of which is that it's not just about philosophizing. It's not a book about theory. It's a very pragmatic book. It provides recommendations on how you can live effectively. It provides recommendations and pathways to achieving and living the life you want to live. But what I like to do in this book series, I've made a few notes of what I and how I want to approach it. The first thing I want to do is share some of the golden nuggets of wisdom that I found from the books that I've read, and those that I've applied and those that I've seen remarkable and incremental results. Then I want to talk about what you should know about the book. I want to talk about how you can start your journey if you want to begin to see similar results in your life. I'm going to talk about why it's important. You see, there's the what, there's the how, and there's the why. And what I've done for The Science of Getting Rich is I've made a few notes of what I consider to be the most profound key points that I discovered and I picked out from the book. Strangely, let me give you an idea about Wallace Wattles and his journey. The book itself dates back to towards the end of the 18th century. He was an interesting fellow. Back in the 1890s, he found himself in a position whereby he started working for a church. The accounts of his life and his journey would suggest that he perhaps may have been a minister. But he moved away from conventional wisdom, from conventional theology and religion, and started looking for practical ways through which people could better their lives. Now, this is back when it was a very capitalistic society in America. And he fell in love with what I call a science of thought. And that science of thought led him down to writing a book. However, the book, The Science of Getting Rich, is a trilogy, which most people do not know. It comes in 3 parts. The Science of Getting Rich is the first of the parts. There is another part called The Science of Being Great. And then the final is called The Science of Being Well. The Science of Living Well, rather, I should have said. Now, the trilogy is an exceptional piece. If you can get it, if you can find it, I think it's worth having. Now, very few really understand the book, but also very few know about the science of getting rich. And it wasn't until 2004 or sometime shortly after that the popularity of the book was known. As a matter of fact, if you've heard about The Secret, if you're familiar with the Law of Attraction movie, this was the book that inspired the author and the producer of The Secret to produce The Secret. Rhonda Bryan acknowledges Wallace Wattles' book, The Science of Getting Rich, as one of the most inspirational influences on her, because she had gotten to a point in her life where things were not working out the way it should have been. And so this book is a powerful book, and over probably the last 12 years, a lot of people have come to know about this book. I find this book interesting for a simple reason. It gives you very simple, practical steps on how you can create what you want. Now, the title in itself, The Science of Getting Rich, is somewhat misleading. Most people might hear the word rich, and they might do what I, unfortunately, for a number of years was conditioned to do. I grew up in a very, very unique environment. I was raised spiritually wealthy. We were financially poor, raised by 2 incredible parents, a remarkable mother, a fascinating father, incredibly fascinating father. And although we had spiritual wealth, we lacked material wealth. Now, Wallace Wattles says in the book that there is a science for getting rich, and it's an exact science like arithmetic or mathematics and algebra. In other words, he said, there are laws you have to obey, there are principles you have to follow, and if you follow those principles, you're guaranteed success. As a matter of fact, he even goes as far as saying, it's almost impossible not to become successful if you obey the laws. And I believe that, and I'll explain why I believe that, and I will explain how I've applied that principle in my personal life and in my business life, and how I've seen changes. But Wallace Wattles emphasizes the fact that it's not about doing things. He says it's about doing things in a certain way. You can have 2 people in the same industry. You can have 2 people in the same company. You can even have 2 people in the same family doing exactly the same thing, but they're getting 2 different results. So here is the first recommendation. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. You see, it's about doing what you do in a certain way. The question then is, what is that certain way? It could be with purpose, with a vision, with clarity of intent. It could also be with passion, being inspired, doing it for a mission, doing it faithfully, doing it exceptionally well. It could also be that you're doing it in such a way that you want to provide the best value. Now, I like a section in the book where he talks about, and he keeps re-emphasizing on this point. He says, you have to do more. You have to give more in use value to people than you collect in cash value. In other words, he's simply saying, the level of service you provide to people should far exceed what you get back in compensation, which I think is a fascinating principle and philosophy to have. In other words, most people are thinking about what's in it for me. Now, Wallace Wattles is saying, forget about you, because there are universal laws that govern the world. And you're guaranteed to be successful if you obey those principles. So focus on what you do for other people. In other words, amaze your customers, amaze your clients, impress, amaze the people around you. Let it be that you're known for the quality of service you provide, or rather for the level of happiness and fulfillment you bring to an environment. Do unto others much more than they give you back in return. And I think that's a beautiful philosophy. Now recognize that back in the late 18th centuries, this was a very difficult concept because you had capitalism at its peak. But he had a very different mindset. And so the application that I found in this book, in my personal life, has been remarkable. There's a section in the book that I like, and I'll go through perhaps the few golden nuggets, but there's a section in the book that I like. It appears in every single chapter. It appears as 3 different highlights or summary points. And he repeats it in every single chapter. Reason being, he's trying to bring your mind back to the principle of spaced repetition. The best way we learn is by spaced repetition. We hear things over and over and over again, and after a short time, it's impressed in our minds. That's how we learn. Now, I like the second golden nugget of wisdom that I learned, and I want to talk about that very quickly. Now, let me just run through some of the key points. The first thing he says is that if you want to be successful, just before I say that, let me just take a step back. The quality and the contents of the book is rich. Now, whilst the name suggests the science of getting rich, when you read the book, there is no section of the book where it tells you and talks about acquiring money per se. What it focuses on, what it tries to do, it tries to show you that you have to have what I call a wealth conscious attitude. You have to have this consciousness about you. There are 3 parts of who we are. I believe that. 3 parts to our personality: spiritual, mental, and physical. In the book, he covers it slightly differently. He calls it physical, mental, and soul. It doesn't really matter what title you choose to use, but I believe we live on 3 levels, and there are 3 parts of our personality. And for us to really live well, we have to live in spirit, we have to live in mind, we have to live in body. Material wealth is what most people think about when they hear the word rich or when they hear the word wealth. But in this book, he's saying you have to live on the 3 levels. In other words, at the spiritual level, you must have love, you must have gratitude, and you must give. So he starts with an explanation of what I consider to be some key points that I want you to bear in mind. One of them is that you should focus less on competition. He says, don't even try to compete. Focus on creating. The principle of that being that we live in an abundant world. There's just so much for everyone. When you compete, you come from the premise that there is a limited supply, and if you don't have it, and if you don't get it for yourself, someone else will have it, which is a very wrong concept to have. He simply says, you create, because whatever you can create in your mind by thoughts, you can manifest in your world, in your life, in reality. So the focus is on the spiritual level. Don't compete, create. But bring that down to the mental level. Don't compete, create. Then transfer that to the lowest level, which is the physical level. He says, don't compete, create. So giving, gratitude, love is an extremely essential part of how you live that rich life. The rich life is not just about material wealth. You want to be rich in consciousness. You want to be aware. You want to be rich in spirit. And that's how you begin. You begin by love. You begin by recognizing your purpose. You begin by living a significant life whereby you can make a difference in other people's lives. You begin by giving. You begin by sharing. Now, he comes down to the second level, which is the mental level, and he talks about a concept which I love, which is about your thoughts. That everything in life is created by your thoughts, and everything we can see around us began as a thought in someone's mind. And so if you can create an idea, if you can sit down and decide what exactly you want, and you impress that idea on your subconscious mind, which many people have different definitions for. Some people call it the ego, the superego, the infinite intelligence. Some people call it subconscious, lower conscious. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but we have a connection. We are one with this source, should I use that word? And that source is infinite. All we have to do is tap into that power. That source is power and wisdom. We are the operant power. We apply the power. And how? We put a thought, we impress a thought filled with desire, filled with a passion, a strong passion, and we impress that thought in our subconscious mind, in our infinite intelligence, and what we want is created. It's a very simple principle. Now think about this. If you look around where you are right now, everything you can see, every single thing you can see, you call reality. You call an object, you call a device, an accessory. But everything you see began as a thought. It began as an idea in someone's mind. So if you want to manifest wealth in your life, if you want happiness, if you want joy, if you want success, if you want good health, you must go back and create a picture, an image, an idea, a thought. Place that idea in your mind. Next to that idea, put a desire. Let the desire be an obsessive one, but an obsessive one from a good point, not a destructive obsession, more of a constructive obsession. Let it be an obsession for good. I love the principle of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. But let your desire be strong. And the reason is simply because what you create in reality is only a product or a reflection of the focus, the will, the strength of your desire. So create an idea, create a thought, impress that thought in your imagination, in your subconscious mind, in your lower consciousness, whatever name you choose to call it. But here is the key. You must believe. Once you've impressed that idea, you have to then believe that what you want is already yours. And once you've done that, let it go. In a very unique way, your imagination, subconscious mind will start to create what I call a pathway to bringing that to reality. But in addition to that, there will be some activities you have to do. So the science of getting rich begins with an explanation about how to live spiritually, how to live mentally, but then how to live physically, which is in principle material wealth. The focus here is material wealth. Now I said something at the start that the book The Science of Getting Rich comes in 3 parts. It's a trilogy. The first part of it is called The Science of Getting Rich. The second is called The Science of Being Great. The third is called The Science of Living Well. So in The Science of Getting Rich, there's a little bit more emphasis on material wealth. But he goes along to show how you can achieve material wealth by following and doing things in a certain way. Now let's talk about that very briefly. When I read the book initially, I didn't quite understand the concept of doing things in a certain way. It took about 2 reads before I could really understand it. What does doing things in a certain way imply? I think the best way of describing it is saying you have to understand the law of replicability. That's a word in science. means to replicate. I remember a number of years ago when I had fallen on some very difficult times and I wasn't where I wanted to be in all areas, materially, financially, spiritually, mind, health. And I fell on a concept called replicability. In other words, you can replicate success. For such a long time, I had been trying to create success for myself. And here is the point I want to give you as a side note, recommendation from me. Find success and copy it, replicate it. Don't try to recreate success. If you can. There's nothing wrong with creating. Creating is great. The point I'm making here is this. Most of us have not been trained on how to be creative in our thoughts. Part of the reason being is very few of us have been taught about the use of our imagination. But you can find other people who have achieved what you aspire to achieve. You can study them. I call it modeling. You study their beliefs, you study their habits, you study their philosophies, you study their activities, and then you model yourself on them by starting to do what they would do. Just imagine that you're already there. Live from the end in mind. See yourself in the same category as those people and start applying some of the knowledge and skills and things that they do. And what you find is in a short while, if you stay faithful to the modeling process, you will achieve similar results. And that's simply what Wallace is saying, that there is a science to getting rich. And all the people who have been wealthy, successful, prosperous, who have good health, who are happy, they do things in a certain way. And he's simply saying, if you do what they do, you're bound to get the same results. Now, I found in a very short time in my personal life that I was able to take myself from being really financially challenged to achieving financial freedom, being able to live off the investments that I have, and then spend my life doing what I love to do, which I think is quite a unique experience in itself. But here is the key. Had I tried to do it on my own, it may have taken me 30 years or more. But by allowing myself to be a protege, a mentee to someone else's philosophy, someone else's experiences, someone else's teachings and guidance, I was able to leverage time using a concept called OPE, other people's experiences. The principle in the science of getting rich work simply says, find how things work and then replicate it. Very simple. Now, let me share one or two other things that I made note of when reading the book. He's very clear and specific about recognizing the fact that action is required. A lot of people saw the movie The Secret. It's a great movie. It brought a lot of awareness to people's understanding. It raised people's understanding and awareness about life and how life really works. But one of the flaws, in my opinion, that a lot of people rightly or wrongly assumed, this was just an assumption most people made, was that all they had to do was think about what they wanted and in a unique way it would arrive. And that's not the case. You have to recognize that by thought, what you want is created. By belief and expectation, it's sent to you, but you only receive it by action. You have to do something. Action completes the process. As a matter of fact, action is the highest expression of faith. So in the book, The Science of Getting Rich, Wattles is very specific about making it very clear that you have to take action. You have to work hard. And he goes and explains in various ways how the grass is not greener on the other side. You have to start where you are. Do what you are doing to the best of your ability whilst in pursuit of what you want. And many of us seem to have come up with an idea that what we really want is far off somewhere else, and for that reason we refuse to give our best to where we are. And Wallace is saying, no, give your best to where you are, because the best way to get to where you want to be is through growth, and the way you get out of where you are is to, in a way, displace yourself out of the job by growing out of it and then taking action towards what you want. So I thought it was very interesting. The next thing I had written down in the book is a very simple concept, and that is the fact that you have to think, you have to understand, you have to act. Think, understand, act. Now, this book goes together with a classic book, Think and Grow Rich. I'll recommend both, and I'll obviously do another book of the day on Think and Grow Rich. It's one of the books that I've read a few times that I think is profound. Similar to Think and Grow Rich, there is less emphasis on money per se and how to get money. There is more focus on you as the individual. Think and Grow Rich applies the same principle. It says, take a step back, recognize that you're a creative being. You can create what you want by thoughts. You can sit down and impress that thought by feeling in your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind goes to work. You then go to work and start acting like the person you want to become. But more importantly, he says, Wattles says, you then have to start doing and providing more in value than what you're being compensated for. He's simply saying you have to understand the law of compensation. You have to do more than you get paid for, which I think is a remarkable concept, but also a concept that is not really appreciated in our day and age today. We just want everything right now. Instant gratification seems to be what leads a lot of our decisions. And so, as I bring this to a close and as I summarize, here are my views. If you do not have The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles, I recommend you give it a chance. You will have to read this book probably about 3 or 4 times. There is so much content, there's so much wisdom in this book that when you read it for the first time, most of it will escape you. Maybe the style of writing may not be your cup of tea, but it's worth having in your collection, certainly worth having. And in reading it, I would suggest you don't read it immediately 3 times. I would say give it space. Spaced repetition is the architect of change, is the mother of learning. And maybe read it the first time, and after 3 or 4 weeks, read it again. Perhaps after 4-6 weeks, read it for the 3rd time. The key is spaced repetition, because when you read it, what you find, you learn something, your awareness increases, your understanding increases. The second time you read it, you find something that you didn't recognize or you didn't see the first time. So I'll recommend you get The Science of Getting Rich. I believe if you are really a student of your life, and if you really want to see growth and changes, I recommend the book. Certainly recommend the book. But more importantly, if you want to understand how things are created, in other words, how things are brought to reality, this is a good book, because it talks about, in a very simple way, it talks about creation and how you begin maybe with an idea, a fantasy, a dream, but how you must convert that into a belief, how much you must have faith, then how you take that, put it into tangible ideas that you impress in your subconscious mind, and how that creates. I like a section, as I conclude, I'm going to say this, I like a section in the book where it talks about a substance. Now, it's a choice of word he uses to talk about this creative substance. Some people call it God, some people call it by various other names. Alan Watts said that you cannot get wet from the word water. The principle of that statement is simply that it's not what you call something that matters. So whatever you choose to call it, he calls it thinking substance in the book. And I thought it was a different twist, But he simply says there's a thinking substance by which and through which all things are made. And it's in its original form, penetrates and permeates all things. And that thinking substance is responsible for creating everything we want. And that thinking substance wants us to have good. Now, the last part of what I want to share about the signs of getting rich is a concept. He says that the desire to be wealthy and rich is natural and it's good. I believe that. He also says that it's that desire you have is life trying to express itself through you. It's like life seeking expression through you. That desire for growth and increase is natural. Decrease is unnatural. So the concept that I learned growing up was that, in a way, poverty was somehow pure, and God loved a lot of poor people, and for that reason a good proportion of the world, perhaps 85% of the world population, are relatively poor. And that's an indication that God, if there is someone in the sky there, loves poor people. And that wealth and riches were something to be shunned, and it was going to take you away from that love of God. As a matter of fact, some people say the love of money is the root of all evil, and they use it in different ways. And for a long period in my early life, I grew up with a flawed philosophy about money, but he goes along to explain why money is good. In a nutshell, he was simply saying, if you live in the spirit, you need everything to live in the spirit and live abundantly. To live in mind, you need mental exercise, you need art, you need exercise of thought and thinking and reading and study and personal development. But he said also, to live in the physical plane, you need good health. But you can't experience good health without having financial means. You need material wealth. Material wealth does one thing. Remember what I said. Create, don't compete. But in order to express our true nature, which is creating, you have to have material wealth, because material wealth, although it doesn't create happiness, it creates the environment whereby your mental capacity and abilities and thoughts can be pure and can be put to good use. And so you can now express at the spiritual level gratitude, love, giving, benevolence. So at the foundation, the desire for riches and the desire for wealth, I think, is good. But it shouldn't be a selfish one. It should be one whereby you're hoping to use it as a means to reach your true potential, express yourself, and make your environment and your world a better place. Now, I hope that's been useful. That's all I'm going to talk about today. Allow me to wish you the best of luck, whatever you do. Again, the book is called The Science of Getting Rich. If you don't have it, it's worth getting, and read it a few times and maybe share what you think. If you've read it and you don't agree, if there are areas that you don't understand, reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to help. It's not a very easy book to understand on first read. You may have to read it 3 times or more. I want to wish you the best of luck.